Hello, amazing people. This is episode 34 of Stand Up with Pete Dominic podcast. Today's question is the same as the last episode. Have you ever thought about running for Congress? My guest is the brilliant Evelyn Farkas, and she is running. Welcome to the classroom of life. That's Stand Up, where every show I do my best to fight apathy and ignorance and learn together from my expert guests and other interesting people about the issues and ideas that matter to you, your family, your community, your country, your planet, your own personal well-being. We all try to help each other figure everything out. I've been talking to a lot of you, especially those of you supporting me on Patreon, having some great conversations, some of which I'd love to bring on the air. Real smart people that listen to the program, and I greatly appreciate it. Keep your feedback coming. Keep giving the show ratings and reviews wherever you're listening to it. Please consider a paid subscription on Patreon every day. New people subscribing on Patreon. You can't believe it. You can't believe it. Patreon.com/Pete Dominic. By all means, share it with your friends. Spread the word. So many of you are so dedicated to helping grow this community and this audience and learning along with me. And it's awesome. I'm starting to have a lot of fun. Starting to come out of the depression, starting to be able to deal with the anxiety, understand where I'm going. Couldn't do it without you. This Saturday night, I'll be in Charleston, South Carolina at the Wolf Street Playhouse, headlining the Charleston Comedy Festival. Link tickets in the show notes for this episode, or you can just Google it. Look forward to any of you who can make it to that. All right, my guest is Evelyn Farkas, and she is running for Congress in New York's 17th District. That's the district I live in. And I thought if I interviewed her and if I interviewed Mondaire Jones, which is episode 33, the last episode, that you should go back and listen to. A lot of people really like that conversation and Mondaire, that maybe it would be too local, but it's not. These conversations have a wide appeal. You don't have to live in this district to be interested in what these candidates are saying. This, of course, is the seat that I was thinking about running for. But I begged off, luckily for them, because there's now 10 people running, and I interviewed just 2 of them. Maybe I'll interview some more of them, but really enjoyed my conversation with Mondaire. And Evelyn Farkas is super impressive, so smart, the daughter of refugees who fled communist Hungary. And she grew up in the district, but she has spent the last 3 decades representing the United States of America, defending democracy, advancing human rights, fighting terrorism, working towards nuclear non-proliferation. She's a foreign policy expert. She worked at the Defense Department, the Senate Armed Services Committee, the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and a lot more. She ran a congressional commission focused on keeping weapons of mass destruction out of the hands of terrorists. She worked in Bosnia, which she talks about with me in very dramatic tones. She also advised former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton during her time as a senator, and she was the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense under President Obama and responsible for our policy toward Russia and Ukraine, and really has been in the thick of things. You've seen her on Real Time with Bill Maher a couple times. She's been on MSNBC. Now she's running for Congress right here in this district. We had a really interesting conversation about all the issues, about her personal life, about what she's seen and what she's done, and I think you're really going to enjoy it. But first, holy shit, what is happening in our country? You wake up every day, and you can't help but think that a game show host is the president, this crazy, insane maniac of a man who is selling out the military to Saudi Arabia, talking about taking the oil from Syria, and now some breaking news last night. House Democrats releasing dozens of pages of records from this guy, Lev Parnas, who is this dirtbag associate of the real... I mean, Rudy Giuliani is such an awful person. He's horrific. I can't believe he was once thought of as a hero. You know, people of color never liked Mayor Giuliani. I lived in New York, of course, during 9/11, and nobody liked him but white people, because he was a dick to people of color. Anyway, he's a dirtbag, if you didn't know. Lev Parnas is his indicted associate. And what the news that broke last night is crazy. What is happening? These files include notes and text messages and a letter from Giuliani to the president of Ukraine written with the consent, quote, consent of the president. And they were trying to push out the United States ambassador because she was going to get in the way, Marie Yovanovitch, of them trying to find dirt and trying to get the president of Ukraine to at least announce that he was investigating Joe Biden, which would have done, of course, a lot of damage to Joe Biden's candidacy. Speaking of Joe Biden, Democratic debate last night. I'm taping this before the debate, but trying to do it to get done so I can watch it. So we'll talk about the now pretty much all white and only 2 females on stage. And Tom Steyer, who's a billionaire, which drives me nuts that you got 2 billionaires. That's not democracy when you can buy your way into a campaign. That is terrible. Terrible. Bloomberg and Tom Steyer, come on. And then this stupid controversy over Elizabeth Warren and Joe Biden, where apparently the Warren camp is saying that Joe Biden once told Elizabeth Warren that a woman couldn't become president. Here's Erin Ryan on that. By the way, I love Erin Ryan from Pod Saves, and she used to come on the show with me. She says, Bernie is right that a lot of people in this country dislike and distrust women. He expressed that this population is big enough to block a woman from being elected president. This is a little cynical, but, like, come on. Takes a lot of bending and stretching to make it sexist. I mean, I listen, if you're more obsessed with the Bernie and Warren thing, and you're not paying attention that hundreds of thousands of voters have just been purged from the Wisconsin voter rolls, then you're missing the boat. But, I mean, I can't even figure out exactly what the problem is with believing voters in swing states or in the South or in certain states are too sexist to elect a woman to the White House. That seems like an assessment of the electorate, not women. So, I don't know. I mean, is that really that controversial? And most importantly, I can't believe Vince Vaughn sat down and had a chat with the President of the United States. Or as somebody on Twitter said, Vince yawn. I like Vince Vaughn. I don't care about his politics. And I don't care that he talked to the president. And nobody else does. It's manufactured bullshit, just like the war on Christmas. So don't let it distract you. All right. Let's get to my conversation with Evelyn Farkas on the podcast. You're going to really like her right now.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not going to do the math.
Yeah. 52, I'll tell you.
52? And you're
I'm
running?
not afraid,
and
yes.
You're okay?
Are you kidding?
Body works?
Nina
Good?
Lowy was my age when she ran.
Really? No,
Yes.
no, I don't mean, geez, I don't mean running for office. I mean, you mentioned that you're a runner.
Running, yes.
I want to keep this on the record. How much do you run?
So, my running route, it's about 4 miles. I haven't checked it exactly, but it's about 4 miles, and I run twice, 2 or 3 times a week.
That's good. That's great.
It's really good, yes.
Yeah, that's really impressive.
And for a 52-year-old woman, it's not bad. I don't do races, basically so that I can keep running till I'm like 90 or, lose my balance, I guess.
Yeah, you haven't had any skeletal muscle issues with all that running?
No, knock on wood, except for my back. So I guess I have, but it's not necessarily a result of running. And I do the planks to minimize discomfort.
So that's the main exercise, yoga and running. But let's get to
yoga.
I mean, forgive me. Planks are
Pilates. Strength training, running. Yes.
And so
the running is really great because I finish my best thoughts running. I'm like, it's like for other people do the shower. I take really short showers, so I wouldn't have a lot of good thoughts.
Why do you take such short showers? Let's get personal.
Because first of all, I believe in being environmentally responsible.
That's really why?
Partly, and then I'm really impatient. I'm really impatient. I don't want to be in the shower. I want to go on to the next thing.
Yeah, so...
Like life, the day, right?
Yeah, so you don't run with headphones on or anything? You're thinking?
I don't. I'm thinking. It's really fun.
What can I put you on a spot and say, like, the best idea that you came up with during a run? Best idea, thought?
Wow, that's really hard. I've finished a zillion op-eds, opinion pieces running,
Got it.
I'll get stuck and I'll be like, okay, I'm going running. I'm going to figure out what we're going to do about North Korea during this run.
Well, then keep running.
Yeah.
So you're running.
Solving world problems, that's all while I'm running.
That's a big deal. You've been doing that for a long time.
Yeah.
That's running for exercise. Now you are running for Congress.
Yeah.
Congratulations on
Thank you.
taking on this extremely ambitious project. I interviewed one of your primary opponents, Mondaire Jones, great guy, speaks very highly of you. I thought that was magnanimous of him. But there are apparently like 9 people that have announced. And so why? Why do you want to do this?
I honestly feel like this is a moment where we need all hands on deck. And I have the experience and the passion and the empathy for the job. So on the experience front, I have already drafted and passed legislation at the federal level. I worked in the Senate for 7 years for Carl Levin, who, by the way, has endorsed me.
Cool. From Michigan, the senator
from Michigan, yeah. I know the members of Congress on the House side and the Senate side, chairwomen, women, ranking members, senior staff, right? I know how to get the money to bring it back to the district. And it's not an esoteric thing. Indian Point, we can talk, it's too wonkish, but we could talk about pots of money and authorities. I know that I
Indian
worked
Point
on a
is
committee
nuclear
that
power
was
plant
correct,
here,
correct, in Westchester, yes. And I was responsible I worked on the committee that was responsible for the Department of Energy, where they have oversight over nuclear facilities in the United States. So,
what do you think of nuclear power as a source of energy?
Well, I think, look, we need to go to renewables, obviously, as fast as we can. But in the interim, we've got to find the cleanest options available. So I think it's a good thing that we're closing the facility, absolutely. But I think we need to make sure that it's sustainable for the community in terms of environment and then in terms of economic future.
So you have a lot of experience working in Washington, in Congress, and that really is very valuable because you know how things work, and as you just mentioned. But the issue that I find so daunting is I thought about running for this same seat that you're running for about a week and a half, and I was like, there's no way I can do it because I don't have the ability to raise the money. And the idea that you have to go out and as much as you have to know about the issues and talk about the issues and communicate with potential voters and convince them to vote for you, you also have to raise money. So what do you think about that as a problem, the campaign finance issue, and how are you doing with that? And then also, are you taking PAC money?
So this issue kills me because I don't come from money. My parents were really hardworking, first, I guess, working class in the sense when they first came to America, they were refugees from Hungary, right? They came to America with nothing. They didn't even speak English. They took odd jobs. When they moved to Chappaqua, okay, by then they knew English and they had some education. So my dad became library director. My mom was at home and ultimately became a hospital pharmacist. But they struggled very hard to make ends meet, even though we were in Chappaqua, which is considered a very fancy zip code. For them, it was hard. For us, it was hard. I remember, growing up, worrying about money. And my mother had to worry about whether she could fill the gas tank in order to do errands. So when I was little, now this I don't remember, but she relayed this to us. And of course, all the anxiety around that is kind of inculcated in me. So when it came to running, I thought, I have to actually raise money to do this. I have to go to other people. Again, I can't put my personal wealth into it because I'm not personally super wealthy. I mean, I'm comfortable, right? I've done well for myself. That I am the American dream, and that's partly why
First
I'm running.
generation, yeah.
Yes, I want to protect what I had. I mean, I did really well for myself because my parents worked hard because they moved to a place where the public schools were outstanding, right? Here in Westchester.
Yeah.
And I
went to good colleges.
And I worked really hard. And also I never took anything for granted. And we can get to that later, but in terms of why I got into foreign policy and what I did there and why I'm so passionate about America, our democracy, and our economic way of life, it has to do with not taking anything for granted. My parents fled because things changed rapidly in their world, multiple times actually, and they taught me about the history of the Holocaust. They taught me about World War II. They taught me about the Cold War. And so I just knew that was an issue. So I guess just going back to campaign finance, I understood that I I needed to go and ask everyone for funds. It's like a whole nother job, and it's a startup.
Yeah, it sounds like a
and I
nightmare.
don't know how you do it if you don't have a long career like I've had.
Right.
So I've made a lot of friends and a lot of connections, and people have a lot of faith in me. They know I can get things done. They know I care. They know this isn't, I'm 52. I'm not building some kind of resume. I already have a resume. I had a great career, that I can draw on as a member of Congress. Certainly it'll be useful to know foreign policy, but that's not what this job is about. This job is about bringing stuff back for the district. It's about improving our democracy. It's about improving our economic security.
So you're first generation American. Your parents are from Hungary. They escaped Hungary because
yes, on foot. Like I said,
how did they become classified as refugees? What was their status? What was their
they
issue?
were fleeing. They were political refugees. So they were fleeing the communist government in Hungary. Had they stayed there, they would have certainly been persecuted, and they had no economic future. So the American government received about 250,000 Hungarians roughly who took refuge in the United States, if I have the numbers right. Mm-hmm. And because our government had encouraged the Hungarians to resist communism, once they rose up and they had the revolution in 1956, and it was clear that the Soviet Union was not going to let Hungary leave their orbit, if you will, and not let them become democratic, our government realized that we were not going to be able to. So Eisenhower was our president. He realized, well, we're not going to go to war, to keep Hungary democratic. So instead, what he said was, all those people who are fleeing the revolution that didn't work, we're going to welcome them, which was also really clever because most of them, including my mother was relatively young, so she was not very educated, but my father was already educated in Hungary to be a lawyer. Of course, when he came here, he had to start completely all over again.
Right. But how do you see your parents' experience and what is happening now in America? Was there a resistance then to Hungarian refugees? You're Jewish, right?
No, we're Catholic.
Oh, you
my
are?
Parents,
Oh, forgive me.
Well, as far as we know.
But I mean, in terms of the doors closing now that's the way I see it, to refugees. We've taken fewer refugees under, I think, Trump than we did under Obama, under Bush. It really wasn't that much of an issue. But you're seeing this rise of fear and concern over the other people from other countries. We've got the Muslim ban, and this is something that has really changed in America. How do you see that change, the doors closing, given your parents' experience and the doors being open for them?
So there are a couple of things. Number one, this president is peddling in fear, and as you said, it's the otherism. He's pitting us against one another and pitting us against refugees, these poor, unfortunate people who have gone through hell and back and are trying to just make their lives better, right? And some of them will qualify for asylum in the United States. Some of them will not, and they will get processed and according to international law, and they will be told that they cannot stay in the United States, and we'll send them out of the United States, right? But there's a process for that. And it's something that we developed. We were at the vanguard of that in the United States. We were leading that. Why? Because of what happened during World War II when the Jews were turned away, and they had every reason. They needed protection from the United States and other countries, and we did the wrong thing then. And as a result of that, and of course other experience, because the Jews weren't the only refugees, but it was the most dramatic, horrific example, right, that caused us to turn after World War II and say, we have to have a better system, right? And so in the case of people who are coming because of persecution, they are accepted as refugees, they are processed, and they should become Americans. And the other reason is not just because there's all kinds of stupid fear-mongering and it's inhumane to treat people as if they don't have a right to a process, but it's also economically stupid. This country was built on immigrants, immigration, new people coming in, bringing new skills, new resources, bringing sweat and tears to this country and building it up to what it is today. And our growth in terms of population growth and ability to sustain our economy is not guaranteed if we don't have ongoing immigration.
I obviously agree with that, but how do you convince the people in the 17th district, which is where you're running, which is where I live, which is why it's really interesting to talk to you and interview you, but I mean, I live in Congress. I got no problem talking about the ignorance in this little hamlet that I live in. A lot of the people where I live are those people. They want to close the doors to our little town. I mean, there's anti-Semitism, there's racism, there's a tremendous amount of anger and fear of undocumented immigrants from Central and South America. I mean, right here in our district, how do you reach out to, or do you even try to reach out to those people and convince them of what you just said is true in terms of economic benefits and so on? Or is it, hey, that's not even worth spending my time?
Yes, you reach out to them because the reason they are responding to this appeal to fear, right? The reason they're saying these things about we don't want immigrants is because they're afraid about their own economic security. And this president has pretended that he's going to do something to help them. It's been almost 4 years. I'm pointing to my watch right now. He hasn't done anything to help their economic insecurity. So what you have to tell them is, look, I'm on your side. This president passed a scam tax plan, which helped no one but the very rich who didn't need it, right? This president tried to take away Obamacare. There's still not a public option. Everybody worries about their retirement, and this president has put forward no proposals to help with all those issues. So what you have to say as someone running for office, as I am in our district, is I'm going to help you. And if people are not worried, if they can worry less about themselves, they will not target others.
Let's talk a little bit about a little bit personal, a bit about your life. You have been kind of a foreign policy expert in wonk for a long time. You mentioned you worked in Congress as an aide to Carl Levin.
I was a senior staffer on the Senate Armed Services Committee.
Aide is probably pejorative. Senior staffer.
It's fine, but I was senior, Pete.
And then you were deputy.
I mean, I had my doctorate. I was in my 40s.
What did you get? You got your PhD in what?
I got it in international relations, and there was a big focus on ethnic conflict and nationalism. I have a whole thing I can tell you about how I went to Bosnia and how this is, again, an extension of what I learned as a child from my parents about ethnic conflict and about this world.
What did you, when you were there getting your PhD, did you have an idea of kind of what you wanted to do with your career? Was it like be a college professor? Was it work in government?
Yes, I wanted to work in government.
You did?
I wanted to make American foreign policy better. I wanted to make Americans safer, and I wanted to make the world safer. I was determined that all this bad history that I'd grown up hearing about wasn't going to happen again. And while I was there, by the way, or no, it was before I went there, so the war broke out in Bosnia. So we had actually ethnic conflict and attempted genocide again, right? And I went to Bosnia. I worked in Bosnia. And one of the most moving, impactful jobs I ever had was working in Bosnia as a human rights officer.
What was so moving and impactful about it?
It was right after the war. So people were still bearing the wounds physically and emotionally.
Sure.
And as a human rights officer, I went on exhumation. So
was that like a State Department?
No, State Department. Yes, State Department nominated me, but I was with the Organization on Security and Cooperation in Europe.
And what was your initiative? What does a human rights officer do?
So they're responsible for reporting on the conditions for people in the area that they're assigned to. So I was assigned to one of the safe areas. If you remember, the Serbs were bombing eastern Bosnia, and they were taking out villages. And when they couldn't bomb them, they came in and killed the Muslim men, right? Srebrenica was where they killed 6,000 men and boys. It was a genocide. And 20 years later, I actually went back with Bill Clinton when I was working for Obama as a Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense. But I'm digressing here.
Well, you were there when Clinton was president.
As
a human rights officer.
That was 1996, so Clinton was president, yes.
Yeah. And then
correct.
went back with him.
And then I went back. Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't thought that I guess I indirectly worked for him, yes, in that capacity.
So anyway,
in
you went back, and sorry, interrupted
so
you.
I think what was so moving for me, everything up to that point, I'd read, of course, Holocaust memoirs. I'd read about World War II. I'd read about bombings. I'd read about, Nagasaki, all these things, right? But to go and go to the exhumations where they were digging up the remains of humans experts digging them up in order to document how they had died, right? And so I was part of a UN group that was doing this, but I was only observing. And I saw, we went to the hillside in these trucks in this very dangerous hilly terrain in eastern Bosnia. And we went into this wooded area, and there were remains there, and there was dirt, and there were bones, and I will never forget seeing this small pink parka, like it was a little girl, who had fled with her family, because what happened was the killers would come at night to their homes and chase them out into the woods, and then they killed them there. And just that, like that, oh my God, that was a little girl, you know.
Does that still haunt you?
It still haunts me, and sometimes I get emotional because it's.
How could you not?
Yeah.
How could you not? Yeah.
And so I came back again and said, okay, this renewed my interest in going into government to make sure this didn't happen again anywhere. And America is so strong, so powerful, right? So I went to work for the Senate Armed Services Committee, as I said, for Carl Levin, and later for Obama in the Pentagon. And my ambition was to just make American foreign policy better so that we're safer and so that other people are safer.
But do you think you succeeded? Because that was during the Bush administration, wasn't it? I mean, the Senate, you didn't have the Senate majority, and there was a lot of Democratic senators. I don't know where Levin was. I forget on the war.
I'm going to tell you
on the war
because
in
I'm
Iraq.
proud of it.
But I think he was against the war in Iraq.
He was
he
against
not?
the war in Iraq, as was I. We did not think there was an imminent threat. He knew that the CIA had not provided in a timely fashion the information to the UN inspectors to actually verify whether Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction or not. So he had an alternative to the legislation which ultimately authorized the war with Iraq, which was to give the inspectors more time. He got 25 votes. That's a quarter of the Senate. I'm super proud of what we did. Of course, the war happened anyway. But we worked very hard to make sure that we educated the American people, that we gave alternatives to members of Congress. And, obviously history is history, but we did the right thing.
How do you see the United States invasion and subsequent occupation, the war in Iraq now? How do you look at it?
Well, I think right now we're at this point where this President Trump, is really putting into jeopardy everything we've worked hard to achieve in the region.
But what
so
did we
whether
achieve?
you agree with the war or not,
it feels like we achieved. I look at it. I'll just
Yeah.
so you know, I look at it, and having spent a lot of time working with the veterans community, I look at it as a waste of human life. I don't look at that we achieved anything. I look at it as we destroyed whatever faith and confidence we had after 9/11, invading that country and killing more than thousands of innocent people died. And more importantly, these veterans and their families been destroyed for a generation. The suicide epidemic, the jobs, it broke them. It was horrifying. I feel like we achieved nothing and we lost so much. Can you spin in and find anything positive about the war in Iraq for the veterans community, for the Iraqis, for the region, or for America's reputation?
Well, I think even though the president at the time, President Bush, and Vice President Cheney, they sold us a bill of goods in terms of what we were going to war for. Ultimately, it did come out later, when President Bush spoke about it, he would speak about democracy. And it is true that Saddam Hussein was a brutal dictator, and the Iraqis now do have democracy. So I think that is a positive outcome of the war. Again, I was not for the war. I would not be for it, again, right? But having said that, I do think we did improve the lives of Iraqis. We did get rid of a brutal dictator. Having said that, we made so many horrific mistakes, and the cost in American and Iraqi lives was so high that you're right. It's tragic. It's heartbreaking. And I don't want to see us do something like that again, which is why I'm so worried about this president and his reckless foreign policy, because in his case, unlike the Bush folks who I think they meant well in as much as they thought they were going to prevail. They did not foresee this unfolding the way that it did. So I don't think that they went into the Iraq war. Yes, there was deception, but I think they thought that they were doing the right thing. They thought that they would get a better outcome. In this case, what I'm worried about is this president's intentions, his motivations, and that his ignorance is willful, and what he doesn't know could recklessly get us into a war that he may not have even chosen, if you follow me.
Yeah.
And that to me is almost more dangerous because you can't predict it than what the Bush people did, because in the case of the Bush war, a lot of people predicted. And in this case, what's so scary about Trump is it's hard to predict, and he thinks that's an asset, and it's not.
You're running for Congress here in the 17th District. I want to talk about some of those issues.
Yes,
I want to talk
please.
some of the other issues, but just one more foreign policy question. You are Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense under President Obama. You're responsible for our policy toward Russia, Ukraine, and Eurasia. You've been invited on television, a lot of shows to talk about this because obviously everything that people have heard about our relationship to those countries in terms of the election interference, and so on. So I just want to ask you, how do you see the Russian interference in the election in 2016?
Yeah.
How do you talk about that?
Yeah. So first, I have to say I was very honored to be selected and appointed by President Obama. I'm very proud to have worked for him. Did you work directly with him? Did you talk with him and meet him? Well, it was a verified. So mainly I work directly with the Secretaries of Defense. Mm-hmm. When you're working at that level, that's high enough.
Yeah.
So interacting with President Obama regularly was not something that I did. I would have loved it.
Yeah.
But obviously my advice was getting to him
Sure.
on a regular basis. Mm-hmm. Now, having said that, when I took the jobs, again, after I was appointed, I understood my job was to help promote democracy in those Eastern European countries. But by the time I left the job, I realized that actually my job was also to help protect America. And that became even more obvious as the media started covering these weird connections between the Trump campaign and the Kremlin. And that to me was shocking. Not that the Kremlin was trying to take down our democracy, but that Americans were actually loving it, to quote Donald Trump Jr., right?
Yeah.
So I was very alarmed. I continue to be alarmed because, Pete, we still haven't taken the necessary action. First of all, we haven't done the full forensics, and we haven't told the American people exactly what happened. I mean, there was a good Politico story recently where they talked about the private company that was running the systems for the elections, and I think it was North Carolina where they had irregularities on the laptops. The public still doesn't know about that. What the public knows is what Bob Mueller thought was prosecutable. We need a 9/11 style commission to tell the whole story. But the Russians they're sitting on our electric grid, right? They're sitting on our water systems. Why? Because they want to have leverage to cause havoc in America if they need to.
You know that those things for facts based on your experience.
Based on what the intelligence community has told us.
Right.
Yeah.
Don't you think that there's just a certain segment of Americans now? I don't divide us on liberal and conservative, Republican or Democrat. Some people just will do whatever it takes to win. If cheating and allowing foreign countries to help win so that they get their agenda passed, fine. It didn't seem to be used to be that way. We used to agree that you can't allow foreign countries to interfere, obviously, because they have their own interests.
Because they're not American.
But now, whatever it takes to win, money, interference, rigging the poll, whatever, it doesn't matter.
Well, this is why I'm running on the American dream, because part of it is protecting our democracy, which is your vote, right? Everyone in this district should feel like their vote is their vote, not being manipulated by the Russians either through Facebook or directly through some kind of, cyber stuff that they're doing, hacking into voting machines.
Yeah.
So, we need to protect our American dream, which is our political way of life, and then it's also our economic opportunity and the security that we expect as Americans to have in America economically and politically.
So you grew up in the district, but I guess the knock on you is that you haven't lived here for a long time. You now live here and you're running. Take on that criticism as well as how you have learned and how you see the issues in this district, which is really vast in terms of income disparities. You've got a lot of impoverished areas in this district. It straddles the Hudson River. For people listening across the nation, it's Rockland and Westchester County that are north of the city. So it also has some of the most affluent people in the country as well, and then the rest of us that are somewhere in between. What do you say to those who say that you're a carpetbagger, you haven't lived in this district, you've only come back to win this congressional seat held by Nita Lowey for 33 years?
Yeah. So first, I would say I left my town to serve my country, and I'm back in my town to serve my country. So I mean, you can't do foreign policy for the United States government anywhere else but out of Washington, D.C., right? So that it was clear that that's what I did. And honestly, I realized that the most impactful, meaningful thing I could do for America and for my district, for which I feel a great debt of gratitude, because again, my parents raised me here. I graduated from Horace Greeley High School. The education I got there was the springboard for everything else. And by the way, I should also give my elementary school some credit, because I didn't speak English till I was 4.
No.
So I learned
really?
everything.
Wow.
Here in our public school system. Exactly.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I could speak Hungarian, but I couldn't speak English.
And now you speak...
And now I speak really good English.
But also...
I speak German.
German and Spanish as well?
I've studied Spanish. I've studied Hindi, Russian.
Wow.
I speak a little Serbo-Croatian from the Bosnia
Does that
time.
come in handy as you campaign? I mean, it's a pretty diverse district.
It's funny that I use my little Spanish. I'll say like, hablo un poquito español, pero muy, muy malo, lo siento.
I speak a little bit, not very good.
Not very well.
Not very well.
I said I speak a little, but very, very poorly. I'm sorry.
I got it.
So, so the elementary Spanish. I forgot French. I could go speak to the Haitian community.
And the other part of that question was, how do you see the issues in this district? Specifically, obviously, you touched on a little earlier. Just people's economic opportunities, taxes. People complain a lot about taxes.
Yeah.
How do you see? It's a very diverse district. So how do you talk to everybody with one voice? I guess you can't, because everybody's seemingly a lot of different situations.
I think you can actually, Pete, because everyone is worried about, almost everyone, except the very rich. But even they are worried. They care about Americans.
Maybe that's
like, you can't paint very rich like they don't have a heart, right? So all Americans want their fellow citizens to have health care, right? I mean, I don't think you can stop anyone in the street and they'll say, no, I don't want that guy to have health care.
I don't know. I think there are some. You listen to these guys on talk radio and they say, I don't want to pay for somebody else's health care.
Okay, they don't want to pay for it, but but if you push them and say that guy shouldn't have health care if he collapses on the ground.
Well, if he didn't take care of himself, I don't know. You have more faith in people than I do.
Maybe I'm being more generous,
right.
but I'm trying to appeal to our better angels. So I think, look, all of the people in this district are worried about their health, their health care.
Yep.
Doesn't matter how wealthy you are. They're worried about their pensions, their retirement. Most people in the old days, they could count on having a retirement. Now people worry, am I going to have enough to retire? Am I going to have enough to retire, and do I have to worry about my parents and my kids, right? There's a lot of economic insecurity. So I think that's something that everyone in this district cares about. The environment. I mean, one of the top issues that I'm campaigning to address is this climate crisis.
Yeah.
I mean, the president has pushed us to the precipice of an environmental disaster.
Yeah, it's a nightmare.
Not entirely of his making, but he's made it worse, right? So that's something, again, you mentioned, we straddle the river, right? I mean, we have a very beautiful, diverse, ecosystem here, but it's under threat.
Do people care about that? It's the issue that I care about the most in our district. Even though I've got all kinds of now issues, financially. Now I'm looking for new health care, and now I'm independent, and all of these other issues.
Yes,
but I
have
always
that Trump care. It's expensive.
Horrible.
But go on. Sorry.
But I always think about the climate. I have 2 daughters who are 12 and 14, so I think long and hard about that. But how do you talk about that as someone running for Congress? Is it something that people bring up to you? What are you going to do about climate change here in the 17th district?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, people care about their water quality, right? Mm-hmm. We have a reservoir in Westchester. It's under some strain. We have Indian Point closing, right? I mean, that's clearly an environmental issue, not just in terms of energy and how are we going to now produce energy in the most clean fashion possible to replace what was generated there. But there's also the issue of cleaning it up. And so from an environmental perspective, I think for people, they understand that everyone has an issue where they can understand that they should be worried about the quality of the air, the quality of the water that touches everyone. In addition to that, though, of course, is economic security, and that's why the smart thing to do is to address the environment and job security simultaneously.
That's everybody's concern. How do you see this? They hear the Green New Deal, they hear socialism, they hear, listen, I want to fix the climate, but you can't destroy the economy. At the same time, people like to make that binary, which drives me nuts. But how do you, when people say that, how do you address it?
I worked for President Obama, and what he did was he provided federal funding for renewables. He created incubators. He encouraged entrepreneurship in those areas, and it worked. So we just need to go back and build on that.
Are there solar initiatives? Are there renewable energy initiatives that you could be supporting, that we could be doing more of? I have solar panels on my house in Congress, and I've the first person on my street. I'm proud of it. I've got an electric car, first person on my street, and probably in my community, I'm proud of it. Although the battery just died after 150,000 miles. RIP. Rest in peace, Chevy Volt. But how do you convince people that these are great initiatives? I mean, why are we opposing them?
I think that the government does need to step in with incentives, and of course there are some states who are doing it. I would call on the federal government to do it, and again, as a member of Congress, that would be within my responsibility.
So in terms of education, the cost of education is insane, higher education especially, yes. And there are a lot of families in this district that are struggling, even if you're doing well. I mean, you could barely afford private school, much less state school. You went to a bunch of colleges. I'm not sure how you paid for it, but it was certainly cheaper then, and for my parents, than it is for my kids now. We're not going to be able to, probably afford college for our kids if it stays the way it is. So right. Is there a proposal that you would support?
I think we need to do something at the federal level to revamp college education, access, and the price. I sit on the board of Franklin and Marshall College. I probably had no business going to Franklin and Marshall College, even in the 80s, from a financial perspective. My mother worked 3 jobs. She was a hospital pharmacist at Yonkers, St. Joseph's, at Northern Westchester, and Westchester County Medical Center. And I still came out and only paid the debt off, because I still had debt, 20 years later.
Wow. With
some federal assistance, because I was working for the Senate. And they always have great deals, for people who work in the federal government.
Yeah, sure.
So, which is good, as they should. Yes, because you're not
Local,
paid
state,
as you are
federal.
in the private sector, right?
Yeah.
But having said that, I think those sorts of programs should be emulated and should be utilized more broadly. So we have to come up with smart ways to reduce the cost of education and to make it more accessible. And that is something that I think can't be left up to states, and colleges are struggling. And yes, maybe there's some consolidation that can occur, but we have to be smarter about it. And this is not sustainable right now. And also there's just so much, it's not a level playing field. And that's the thing that bothers me the most, that when costs comes into it. So at Franklin Marshall, we have something called the Talent Initiative. So we open the doors by removing economic barriers, but we don't have a huge endowment. So we know this isn't sustainable into the future, unless we somehow miraculously get more money or some kind of other relief.
So is there anybody that you identify with in terms of any of the issues that we talked about that's running for president? I don't want to pin you down. Are you more progressive? Are you more moderate? Because I think it just ruins everything in these conversations. Yeah. But is there when you look at the proposals that Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren have for education, for a Green New Deal, versus the more quote moderates like Buttigieg, Raymond Klobuchar, of course Joe Biden? Is there something that you think is more realistic, more pragmatic, that you can, on the record, support without being pinned into a box? Because that's the problem that media does, and I'm not going to do that to you.
No. So this is the thing. So where you can hear I'm a very passionate, emotional person, I feel strongly about doing the right thing, right? That's why I'm running. Like, I wouldn't be doing this to myself, and my loved ones, right? Having said that, I am super pragmatic. I just want to get stuff done. Okay? And that means, for example, on healthcare, I'm not going to run into Congress and say everyone who has a private healthcare, plan has to get rid of it tomorrow, right? We have to do what's possible, what's pragmatic. That doesn't mean slowly. I'm not saying, we have to go really slowly. I'm saying get as much as we can get done as fast as we can, but just make sure that we get it done. And if a lot of people are opposed to something, you're not going to get it done. Sorry.
What you mentioned your family. You seem like someone who is just a workaholic. You, unmarried, no kids.
So my sister once said she thinks I'm married to America, which doesn't mean I'm like a
It's
robot.
a good slogan.
Because I love a lot of Americans, including my family. I'm very close to my siblings, my parents. Obviously, my parents are still alive. My dad's 94.
Is
my
that
mom's
right?
81.
Oh wow.
Yes.
Oh cool.
I have 5 nephews. I'm it takes a village, so I'm whether they like it or not, I'm there. They're not teenagers yet, so they like it. I have 5 godchildren as well. The Venn diagram has 1 in the middle, if you remember what those from math class.
Yeah.
Meaning there's overlap of one little guy, who's my nephew and my godchild. And I have a lot of friends. I have a lot of deep relationships, but I haven't met yet the right Mr. Dr. Farkas, whatever you want to call him.
Well, I'm not sure that people are going to necessarily care about that when it comes to voting for you, because unless they somehow think that matters in terms of relatability. But I will play identity politics with you, as I did with Mondaire Jones. First of all, what do you think of that phrase, and what is different for you about being a female candidate, if anything?
I think for this district, all things being equal, because of the legacy of Nita Lowey, because she was a pioneer woman taking that seat in the House from our great state of New York, right? That all things being equal, many of the voters in this district, many of the Democratic voters, prefer a woman. Having said that, in my case, all things, as I said, are not equal. So you can get the best, the most experienced, the most, the one with the greatest national stature, the one with the greatest passion, and again, the experience. From day one, I will be able to pass legislation, because I know how to do it, in the tradition of Nita Lowey. So all things are not equal. So I think in that case, since all things are not equal, being a woman helps, because it's a little bump, right? I don't think voters will vote for anyone just because they're a woman.
You strike me as someone who probably your entire life and career is been, obviously very educated, confident, but I still do have to ask, because I think it's important. Have you ever dealt with, whether it's in government or anywhere else, sexual harassment? Is there anything that you would want to share about that? Because I've been really interested whenever I ask women this question, that their answers, because I think it matters in terms of how you can relate to the victims, survivors of sexual assault, sexual harassment. Working in the federal government, there certainly is a lot of that we hear, but then I make this stupid and ignorant assumption that, Evelyn is such a strong and confident person. No one's going to mess with her.
I think that every woman, first of all, every woman has experienced discrimination based on her gender in her career, I think, without fail.
You have?
Of course, yeah. It doesn't mean that I let it keep me down. I clearly haven't, right? But there's all kinds of sexism, even on the part of women, that you experience, even when you're 52 years old. So,
what do you mean?
I call it, briefing while female. You can go and you can be the expert, and you're briefing, let's say, members of Congress, right?
Yeah.
And still there'll be someone who treats you like you're briefing while female.
Is that right? What does that look like or feel like?
You know it when you see it, but how do I explain it? It's somebody who is treating you differently from your male counterpart who's also briefing, for example. Or your male counterpart doesn't give you the airtime that he gives another male, or the interruptions. I mean, all of these classic things. And then subtle things. In the media world, oftentimes the minute the guns start going off, they'll call men, even if the men haven't stepped foot in the Pentagon in 20 years.
That's really
hello,
interesting.
I actually know a bit about these, even the weapon systems in some cases. I know a bit about, decisions leading to war or peace, right?
Sure.
And it doesn't, and they'll call on someone who, again, hasn't worn a uniform in 20 years, hasn't stepped foot in the Pentagon, but they're male. So those types of things happen all the time.
Right.
And in terms of, actual assault and harassment, I think most women have experienced some version, of, assault can happen in the workplace or outside the workplace, obviously. And in the workplace, if there's harassment, with a power differential, that's what we're trying to really fight back against, in the professional environment.
Are there specific issues of inequity, gender inequity in the district that you've seen that you want to address?
Absolutely. I mean, it's not just a district issue. We have income inequality. Women are not paid the same, and it's even worse if you're a woman of color.
Right.
The discrepancy is ridiculous. And I have to applaud Kamala Harris for bringing that to the fore as part of her campaign. I think it's appalling that in the 21st century we still have that kind of situation.
Just a couple more minutes. I appreciate your time, but the reason I preface this question with that is to prepare to interview Evelyn, I watched a bunch of your media appearances, and probably one of the longer ones is Real Time with Bill Maher.
Yeah.
And I was on that show, and it's a really thoughtful conversation.
The one with, on gun control?
I forget, were you on more than once?
Yeah, I was on more than once.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Good for you. But the problem I find is in our media is that these are very short attention span, these hits. So much on television is such bullshit because it's such short attention span. That's why sitting down with you here, longer form, hearing you communicate like this and field a bunch of different questions on a bunch of different issues in a conversation that, by the way, doesn't have to be confrontational. That's how you get ratings, and that's how you get ratings, by driving conflict, and that's the cable news game, and that's how you sell ads. So my question to you is, what do you think the problem is with our media today? It's a huge question, I know, but I feel like that is the hardest thing for someone like you to both harness and fight against. And it's the hardest thing for for democracy, because radio, hate radio as I call it, right-wing talk radio dominates right-wing television on cable. Fox gets way more viewers than CNN and MSNBC combined. Why do you think that is, and how do you combat that and have a thoughtful conversation like the one we've been having that'll cut through to voters and constituents and Americans?
Yeah, I think you're right. Like, there is a real tendency to amplify conflict, to create a horse race, because somehow that's more exciting. It appeals to the more, primal natures of humans, right? At the same time, I get so many of my Twitter followers, they're giving me feedback regularly every day saying, thank you so much for explaining that. Thank you for making it clearer. Thank you for that information. Every time I watch you, I know I'm getting new information. So when I go on, I make it my job. I don't talk any longer than the other people, but what I try to do is just cut through the baloney and not give my opinion unless it's built on giving them a couple facts first, right?
Yeah.
And explain why this is the way it is, why these policymakers can't make a good decision, right? Because there is no good decision, or what have you. There's no good information, right? And just really, and give some facts. A lot of times people, you turn on the TV and they're talking about North Korea, and an average American, they're going to work, they're doing their job, and then like, North Korea, where's North Korea? And sometimes it's good to say, okay, look, they're right under the Chinese, and the Chinese are trying to, control what they're doing, but they can't really control them. They pose a threat to us. They want to be independent, blah, blah, blah. I mean, there are things you can tell the American people that they appreciate. So I do think, like, your program, it's similar to Vox. Vox also does a lot of this deep dive in an informative but interesting way, right? Am I pandering to you too much?
No, thank you. I hope that's what people get out of it. I appreciate it. I'll take it. Yeah, I mean, that's important, but most people just don't listen or watch that way. Do you think you'll be able to work with Republicans in Congress? Because the way I see it is that they're filled with, the Republicans in the House that you'll be working with, it's filled with conspiracy theorists and racists. I mean, it's much different than it used to be, probably even when you worked in the Senate. And I mean, Congressman Paul Gosar just posted a fake photo of President Trump with the Iranian president, which never took place. It's up right now. He still has it up on Twitter. Right. How do you work with people that don't share your reality? It's different to not share an ideological view, but your own reality, and who think that you shouldn't even have control of your body.
Yeah, I think that's another issue. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's sexist, it's racist, it's conspiracy theorists. Yeah. It's horrible. Yeah.
Look, I think that you continue to speak the truth. You continue to bolster the authorities that, the experts who know the truth, right? I mean, what this president and his cronies in Congress do, so the far right, what they do is that they are making the credible sources of information, the intelligence community, the FBI, the the scientific community. They're trying to make them less credible. They're
Right.
basically knocking down experts and expertise.
And government.
And the reason I want to go into Congress, one of the reasons is because I want to speak truth and I want to stand up for the truth. That's what I've done. Everybody knows it. I'm not a partisan, policy line. I don't run around spouting partisan lines. I just say it the way it is, because I don't have time to muck around making things up. This is a mission for me. I really want to make America better. I want to make America the best that we can be. I want to stand up for the American dream.
Well, that's a good place to end. Evelyn for New York, evelyn4ny.com. If you want to support her, send her money. If you're in the district, we just laid it out for you. And I so appreciate your time. I would take more of it. I would keep talking to you for hours. You're a really, really smart
Thank
woman.
you.
And I could, especially with foreign policy and all that's happening in the world, I appreciate you sitting down with me today. And I wish you the best of luck. Thank you, Evelyn.
Thank
Good luck
you.
to you.
Thanks, Pete. Thanks.
All right.
Well, there you go. Evelyn Farkas. What did you think of her? Check out her website, evelyn4ny.com, evelyn4ny.com. I really, really liked her. I also really liked Mondaire Jones, and they are two of 10 people running for Nita Lowey's congressional seat in New York's 17th district. Fighting 17th, the seat that I was thinking about running for. All right, well, how was the debates? I'm about to go watch them now. They've just started. I'm actually looking forward to it a little bit. I'm feeling good. 3 days where I have been haunted by my fears and anxieties. I've been eating better, mostly plants. I went for a run today. It felt amazing. I met with a new therapist yesterday, and he does cognitive behavioral therapy, which I think is something that I really need to do. I've also been meditating for 20 minutes a morning. I get up, I sit up, I meditate for 20 minutes, get the girls up, get them both to their separate middle and high schools, I drive them both. I come back, I walk the dog, I write in my journal, I eat some plants, maybe an egg, maybe some hard-boiled eggs, and I get to work on my to-do list. It's going well. The therapist said at the end of the session, as I was getting at, he said, the other thing that's really good to fight anxiety is cardio. Yeah, you do some cardio. I was like, yeah, I know. And I haven't been doing it for 3 weeks because I've had this nasty chest cold. I think I might have pneumonia. We'll see. I got to get a chest x-ray according to my physician. Any whoosies, we'll get there. Got to get the chip in my tooth fixed. Got to do a lot of things because that's what life is thrown at you. Thank you so much for sharing with me all of your anxieties, depression, what's causing it, your vulnerabilities. We all have our time in the suck. Some more than others, some on and off all day, some comes and goes. Either way, let's keep talking about it. I'd really like to talk with you. I'll give you a call. We'll chat. Okay, that's it. I'm done. Go to evelyn4ny.com, and I will talk to you on Friday when I have comedian, journalist, writer Chloe Hilliard. Really funny, really smart. You're going to love that one. Go to patreon.com/Pete Dominic and get a paid subscription or even upgrade your subscription. I'm flirting with the ideas of doing this podcast 5 days a week, talking about video now, talking about going live, getting very ambitious. Appreciate your support. Could not do it without the almost 300 subscribers. 300 Patreon subscribers in 2 months is apparently a lot, and we keep getting new people subscribing every day. So tell your friends about the show. If you're listening and you haven't subscribed, go to patreon.com/Pete Dominic and subscribe to the podcast, because I'm putting everything I have into this podcast. But it's really hard to make money doing a podcast unless you're selling ads. And I have thousands and thousands of listeners, several thousands of listeners for every episode. But we've got to get up over 10, 20, 30, all the way to 1 million listeners. And we can do it. I've got the network. I've got the ability. I've got the ambition. Let's do this. Let's build this community. Let's rebuild this community. Let's add to it. Community of thoughtful, kind, curious, passionate people. I don't care what your politics are. We're going to learn together every day. And finally, You know anybody in Charleston, South Carolina, I will be there Saturday, January 18th. One show only, just me. It's like a one-man show, 90 minutes of me. Have a good time. Tell your friends there's tickets still available. Breakdowns lead to... Shit, I messed it up. Breakdowns lead to breakthroughs. That's what my wife said, right? Okay, I'll talk to you on the social media, on the phone, in the email. Let's keep it going, everybody. Keep that train moving. Keep your train moving. If you need help, reach out to me. If you're struggling, reach out to me. I've been talking to people, and it's been amazing. You've listened to me. I'll listen to you. We'll get better together. Keep that train moving.